Hey, how's it going, guys? So in this tutorial video, I'm actually going to show you how to not only set up the parenting of objects, but also how to set up animation scenes and have those activated through different scripts. So right here, all I've done is just create a very simple cube, nothing special. Unfortunately, I forgot to save my last file, but that's no big deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate this cube a few different times, and what I want is I actually want these cubes to kind of like come out of this in stages. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. I'm going to set that up inside the animation window. So I create an empty game object called Animation Basics, and this is where all the cubes are set. Right now they're all a child of Animation Basics. But instead I actually want to, that is not what I want to do. There we go. I actually want to come in here and set all these. Now I know I didn't get these all in order. That's not a big deal. As long as I know to select the right ones, that's the biggest thing. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm actually going to click on Animation Basics. I'm going to close this window out for the time being. And I'm actually going to create a new clip. Now when you do this, you need to make sure that you have Animation Basics or whatever object you're animating, going to be animated, selected. Because whenever you create a new clip, it'll actually create a new animation component or new animator component. It's one of the two. It'll actually attach it under the hierarchy for you automatically. So for this, we're just going to call this the idle animation, and we'll hit save. And so as you can see with this select, we have the animator attached to it, and we already have the controller attached to it as well. Let me go in here to move this window. Oh, come on. There we go. So the animator, this is the animation that we created. This is actually this animation right here. So as you can see, it's set to idle, which is what I have named this. What I want to do is I want to be able to press a button on the keyboard. It can be any key I choose, and I want it to actually start stacking up. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're actually going to click on the idle right here. We're going to say create new clip. So for this clip, we're going to call it move up. We'll hit save. And I'm going to go ahead and create all the other clips. And so we're going to add, not a property, that's my bad. We're going to click on move up, and this will be called idle up. And then we're going to create one more, and we're going to call move down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here to move up, and if this just completely disappears on you or none of this, just make sure you click on whatever your animator is attached to, whatever game object is attached to, and it'll pull us right back up. Usually that's not an issue. Now, the instructions will show that, to do it like this. This is only helpful for if you're going to try and set it up. It just makes it easier to view. It's not something that you have to do to get it to work. Normally, if it doesn't work, it's because there's a script or something like that missing, which I'll go into more in depth a little later on in this tutorial. So for the move up, what we want to do is we actually want to add the properties to this. Now we have the cube right here. This is our base cube. We will not be messing with that. Then we have cube 3, 2, and 1. So what we want to do is we actually want to expand these out. So cube 3 is the first one. We're going to change the position of that. And then we're going to add another property. We're going to come down here to cube 2, and we're going to change the position of this one. And then we'll do this one more time for cube 1 right here. So let me go ahead and throw that transform component in there. So all these transform components are now in place. They are all zeroed out. And the reason why you want to set this up like this, because as I said, I want these to come up in sets. So essentially it'll be like this, and then it'll be like this, and then it'll be like this. However, in order to do that easily, if we change the transform component of 3, it automatically moves these others for us. And that's why it's important to make sure that your game objects are set like this. So whenever the parent or should I say, whenever the child of Animation Basics is moving, it'll move the children underneath those parents as well. And that's why it's very important to make sure you have that set up correctly. So because cube 3 is the first component we're going to move the marker over here to 1. Now you want to make sure you press the record button, and this white bar, you want to make sure this is at the end of your animation sequence. In this case, I'm just going to leave it as a default of 1, and we're just going to move this up right about there. And then we'll let off the record. Now if you want this to have a little bit more flair, that's understandable. All you have to do is just minimize it a little bit, then we'll click on this one, we'll do the same thing, we'll click on this one, we'll do the same thing. So now whenever we move these, it'll actually look like that they're stacked inside. But as you can see, as you move this, now it's actually moving properly. So the next thing we want to do is we want to click on the second cube, which is the next child underneath, which is the child underneath cube 3. We will press the record button. We're going to move this up. The reason why I turned off the record button just a second ago is so this way whenever I scale these down, we didn't run into any issues. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and click on cube 1, and we're just going to move this up. And we're going to set all those right there. So we'll click on the record button again, and you can actually preview the animation by just doing that. But now, I said I want it to go up in stacks. As you can see, it just goes up all at once. So the way we fix this is I'm going to actually scroll my mouse wheel down. And so we start with cube 3. So what I want to do is I actually want to grab these two. And I'm actually going to, not that, I'm going to slide right here. And then I'm going to select these. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to slide it over. So now when we hit play, you'll see that they actually go up in stacks, one after another. If you want it to be a little bit more smooth, where it's like when this one's just about done, then the next one starts going, all you have to do is just move these back just a hair. I'm actually going to move them back to, say, 1.5. And then I'm going to select these. I'm going to just move this back to 0.5. So now when we hit play, you'll see that they actually just keep going a lot more smooth. Now, in the wind turbine, they were talking about going into the curves. And so the curves of the animation, let me make sure this is set properly. So the curves of the animation, if you click here, you can actually come in here and you can change how this is set. If you set it to auto, it will basically just fill in the best that it can, more or less. But you can also change the curves of them. And so I'm going to show you real quick that by changing the curve of this one, how this one just kind of like swoops up like that, on how much different it looks. So I'm actually going to select off of that where it's just Animation Basics and watch the first cube when it comes up. Or I'm sorry, the second cube. So you see how it has that little jump? That's because of the curves that I was animating, or that I was modifying underneath of the curves sheet. That is why we got those. That's why we got those results. So I'm actually going to make sure both these are set back to clamped auto. And if you click somewhere and it just comes up with that, the reason for this is these little dots right here are what you actually need to be clicking on. If you're clicking off of those, it'll just come up with add key, and so you need to make sure that the mouse is hovering over those dots specifically. Moving these dots will also change the movement of the animation sequence, so keep that in mind as well. So the next thing we need to do is we actually need to change this to, we actually need to set up move down now. And the way we do that, let me go back here to move up. I'm actually going to select all of these, hold down Control and press C. I'm going to come here to move down, Control V. And so now you're probably thinking, well, wait, Jimmy, this is going to be going up. I actually kind of cheat with this a little bit, because what I'll do is I'll move this down. Well, first I'll need to make sure that none of them are selected. But I'll move this to here, and I'll move this in place of that. And so by me switching those two around, basically all I'm doing is just, so this is at 1.5 and this is at 0.5. Move that there. Just move this to 1.5. And this is at 240, okay. So that can go to 240 and this can go to 140. So now if we hit play, because we've swapped all of these around, you'll see that it actually goes down and sets like we want it to. And this way we don't have to come back and try to figure out what the transform components of each one was. And essentially is what I could have done is I could have just simply selected all their positions, and on the last key right here just reset them all back to 0. I could have done that, but I didn't want to. Plus, this is just like a little trick that, you know, it might help you out later. It might not be very useful for you, but it's still a little trick that I think is really helpful to know, or at least it can be. So with that said, now we need something that tells these things, okay, start doing your thing. Before we do that, we need to come in here to idle up, because as you see, there's nothing set. So what we need to do is we need to come here to this component. We need to click on all of these last keys right here. I'm going to press Control-C on the keyboard. I'm going to come to idle up, Control-V, and I'm actually going to move all of these down to here. And so now, as you can see, these are all set. I'm going to go ahead and save the scene because that's something I forgot to do last time. Oops. So what we want to do is inside the animator window, you're going to want to right-click on your idle, and you're going to say Make Transition, and we're going to set it down here to Move Up. From Move Up, we'll right-click, Make Transition, and we'll just do this all the way around. Now, like I said, you don't have to have it in a perfect circle. You can literally have it like this. It doesn't really matter. It's just whatever you feel more comfortable with, whatever looks better for you, because some of the projects I've worked on in the past, I've had so many of these bars, I've spent hours just trying to line them up, trying to get it where it's actually like workable. So try to keep in mind of what kind of animations your project's going to have and the best setup that you can come up with for it. This way you're not, you know, creating a hassle for yourself later on down the future. I cannot stress that enough. So we need to create a new trigger for this. So you have float, which means it's basically if a value is above a certain thing that has a decimal digit. And it basically means if it's a whole number, bool, true or false, trigger is activated by trigger. At least that's my understanding. For bool, we're just going to say, let's just say moving up. I'm going to press enter. Now I want you to keep in mind of the capital M and the capital U. I'm going to get back to that here in a minute. So from idle is what we want is we want this to go and trigger move up. And we're going to do this. I'm not worried about exit time. Normally I am, but for this project and tutorial I'm not. I'll talk about that here in just a second. So these bars right here, we're going to move this in just a little bit. Where that says 100%, but we don't have anything over here. And we're just going to move that one all the way over. And we'll just move that all the way over as well. And the nice thing about this is whenever you move this over, it'll automatically snap to where this is. The reason why we want to do this, for this it doesn't really matter because there's no animation for idle or idle up or anything like that. It's just a stagnant. But for the wind turbine project that you're going to more than likely be doing, this is good for whenever it's spinning. So as what it'll do is I'll actually hit that point of the full 360, and when it goes back to 0, it'll actually start triggering the other animation, which is where it winds down basically. Oh, sorry about that. And so that's why it's important to make sure that you do this right here. For this one, this doesn't matter, but for the exit time, it basically says, okay, so it'll play this animation. This is the time it takes for it to exit and switch over to this transition. So that's what exit time is, and that's why this right here is important for the conditions. We want moving up to be selected to be true, and so that will actually go through this transition and come down here. And for this, what we'll do is we'll make sure that this is set to false. We're going to do the exact same thing here. I'm actually going to scroll up on the mouse wheel to zoom in a little bit. I'm just going to move this back, move this all the way in, and do that. In fact, I'm actually going to do that for all of these transitions because, lol, and why not? And make sure that's set. Now, like I said, for this, I really don't have to do this, but for some projects that you have that are mechanical, basically, it's good to get in the habit of doing this, which is why I'm doing this for all of them. I don't need to because of how simple this animation is, but you know, in your case, doing the wind turbine project, it's highly recommended that you do this. So inside my project, I'm actually going to create a new script, and I'm just going to call this input script. And this gray right here, this is just a material I created for a simple plane that I put inside the scene. Yeah, because that's normal. Really? So anyways, this is just a simple plane that I create inside the scene, and I just simply drag and drop this gray on top of it. You don't have to do this. The only reason why I have done this is because this way it's easier to see. And if you're wondering why this cube popped up, it's because I didn't close out this window, so now there we go. So, what we need to do is we need to come in here to the input script. Load up Visual Studio. I actually had an issue with it. So we're going to pick right back up where I left off last, that I'm sure of that you'll be able to pick it up. Let's see, I'm going to need the start, and I will also need the update, so I'm actually going to leave those alone. The first thing I'm actually going to want to do is we need to create a game object. So we'll have to make this public game object, and I'm just going to call this cube NM, and then we'll go ahead and set up a private animator. I was hoping it would have popped up, but it did not. I'm just going to call this NM. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is we actually need to call this. So we're going to say NM equals cube NM dot get component, and the type of the component we are getting is of the animator. There we go. And so now is what I want to do is I actually want to set up where if I press the space bar, that's what's actually going to activate it. And the way I'm going to do this is by saying if input.get key down, let's say key code dot, we'll just do space because I want to do the space bar. And so right here, we're going to create another if statement inside of this. If and in, I was like, wait a minute, I'm doing that wrong. We're going to do a get bool, and the purpose of getting the bool is it's basically looking at the animator component and looking in here to see what its setting is, and so it's called moving up. Now, for those of you who are screaming at me right now, good job. For those of you who are wondering why I just said that, I will explain. So, the NM, which we are calling from the cube NM, and we're getting a component of the type animator. This is actually looking at the animator of this game object. And what we're doing is we're saying, okay, for this animation, which is the animator, we're going to get the bool moving up, and we're going to make sure that, you know, if that equals false, we're going to do something. In this case, it starts off as equaling false. So once I said before, those of you who just yelled at me, good job. Those of you who are wondering why I'm saying that, if you notice, moving up right here is different from over here. If you remember correctly, I said keep note on how this M and this U is capitalized. If you notice right here, the M is lowercase, but the U is capitalized. If we try to run the script, it will never pull anything up because the spelling is not the exact same. So when it comes to scripting, keep a very close eye on capitalization and I guess basically punctuation. Program is just like really fancy grammar. So anyways, what we want to do is we want to do NM, if I can spell it correctly, and we're going to do set bool. And so is what we're essentially doing now is we are saying, okay, so if this right here is false, then we're going to set it to true. And the way we set this to true is just like that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to say else. And the way that else statements work is we say if this, and then we have else, which is basically looking at what this if statement was referring to, and then the else will look at it and say, okay, otherwise we're going to do this. Enjoy it. So we're going to do anim set rule, moving up, false. There we go. And we're going to save this. So now if I press the space bar, it will do something. Well, it won't do anything. And the reason why, because I don't have a script here at all. So what I actually need to do is let me just go ahead and attach it here. Now, I don't have to attach it here. In fact, I'm going to show you this real quickly. Let me go here to main camera. I'm going to attach it to the main camera script. I'm going to move this here. So I'm going to show you this for two reasons. But the first thing I want you to notice is when I press play, just there we go. And I'll press spacebar again. And there you have it. A very simple animation that is set up. Now, you don't have to do it strictly through the key code. I don't know if some of y'all have seen this or not, but there's actually another thing called get button. And so is what I'm going to show you. I don't know why I have that window open. Because what I'm going to show you is we're actually going to delete this entire sequence right here. Input.get button down, and this button is going to be called I don't know, move the cube. And so I actually want to do this real quick because I noticed someone got a null reference exception with the get button that it does not exist. And so I'm going to show this off real quick. Watch what happens when I press play. And there we go. You're actually going to see argument exception. Input button move the cube is not set up. So I'm going to show you how you can do this, and this is also real helpful where if you want it to be set up for keyboard controls or if you want it set up for gamepad controls. Is what we're actually going to do. I could go in through here, but I'm going to show you how you locate it. You're going to click up on Edit. We're going to go down here to Project Settings. Oh, I guess I did not have that tab. Well, now I do. So anyways, sorry. Under the Project Settings tab, you're actually going to look for Input, which is right here. And you see that we just have Axis. But when you expand that, now we have everything. So is what we did right here is we're looking for a button called Move the Cube. And so is what we'll need to do is we'll actually have to make 19. And right here for this cancel button, we'll call this Move the Cube. And for the positive button, we're going to say space. And if you had a joystick or a gamepad or a controller of some sort, you could alternatively use this button. But now when we hit play and press spacebar, as you can see now it works and that exception goes away. I can press it again. But now here's what's really interesting about doing this, and this is something else you need to be careful with when it comes to capitalization and everything. By changing this from a lowercase m to an uppercase m, watch what happens. So once again, we get this error where if we try to click on it, just so you can hear me clicking on it, you'll see that I am clicking on it. It no longer works. But by making sure that the spelling is the exact same, and if you want, you can always just come in here, double click, Control C, minimize that, select that, Control V. This way you know for sure you got the spelling corrected. Or you got it correct, and everything will work just as it should. So I'm going to call it the end of this tutorial. I know it's kind of longer than normal, but if you have any questions, just send me a message. You're more than welcome to send me a private message. I'm not going to hold anything against you. So until then, if you have any questions, please let me know what kind of tutorial that you would need. If it's anything that you're struggling with, I'd be more than happy to go over with you. So until next time, see you then.